Hello everyone, this is Crow from Vilebranch on titansleague.org, and I'm here today to make a video showcasing the warrior talent trees, Arms, Fury, and Protection, and some small changes I've made to them. Let's go check it out. And here we are in game, just outside of the starting hub by some training dummies. The three talent trees, Arms, Fury, and Protection, aren't too much of a far cry from their original counterparts. I took a lot of inspiration from Cataclysm in the regards for the design philosophy, with Arms being a heavy emphasis on the weapon damaging attacks and rage generation, along with a lot of utility, and this lends a lot of power towards PvP. So as you can see here in Arms, we have Improved Heroic Strike, which reduces the cost of Heroic Strike and increases the critical strike chance. You also have Deflection to increase the parry chance. Healing done to yourself is increased by a large margin, and healing done to you is increased by a smaller margin, up to an amount of 6% and 20% respectively. You have Improved Charge, which will increase the amount of rage you generate from charge. We also have Second Wind, Tactical Mastery. Those two are relatively unchanged. You also have Deep Wounds, also unchanged. Drums of War. This is one that reduces the cost of your shouts and pummel by up to 10 rage. This is so that you can use them more often. Something I would like to point out that I may not have mentioned in other videos is that while you only have 31 total talent points to get to the capstone talent of the tree, you do have 41 total talent points. So, a lot of the top two rows are accessible to other trees that are fully fleshed out towards the bottom. That also means you could put 21 in and still get a full 20 to dedicate yourself to being a true hybrid. One of the things I wanted to do was make sure that people who wanted to go hybrid talents or experiment a little bit would not be disenfranchised because they felt coerced, like on some other servers, to put all of your talent points into one tree. That's no fun. And one of the realms, Duskhaven I have played on, had that problem, where if you did not put all of your points into the talent, one tree that is, you did not get some penultimate talent that would make or break the tree. So with that out of the way, I want everyone to know that the top two talents are relatively weaker than the rest of them, and the more points you put into the tree, the more power reward that you were given, and opportunity costs are had later on. So we see over here, Taste for Blood is still alive and well here. It increases the critical strike chance of your overpower, and occasionally allows your Ren to allow you to use Overpower. This was combined with Improved Overpower, a different talent. We have some versions of the two. Juggernaut allows your charge to be used in combat, and following a charge, your next slam has a 50% chance to critically hit. This is because Slam on this server is a baseline ability, and I believe used in all three trees. Now we have Impale, which has not been changed. Critical strike damage bonus. Improved Hamstring. This isn't just the proc chance for the root effect, but it also reduces the global cooldown so that you can use the ability faster. I like this idea because one of the issues I had was that it did not feel like a utility spec, and so by adding Improved Hamstring and reducing the cooldown, you can use the ability faster. And by using it faster, it feels more like a kind of a toolbox spec. Anger Management will just generate 2 rage every 3 seconds, period. Deadly Calm is an ability from later expansions I decided to create in Wrath of the Lich King. When activated, it reduces the rage cost of all your abilities by 100%, and the global cooldown and cooldown of Overpower is reduced to 1 second. This makes Overpower very, very strong when you pop this cooldown. Blood Frenzy increases your melee attack speed by 10%, and in addition causes your Arena Deep Wounds abilities to increase physical damage caused to the target by 4%, and your melee critical strikes against the bleed target increase the amount of bleed damage taken. And so you have this going on, where you can apply the debuff and also increase the amount of damage dealt by your bleeds. So there's some synergy with this in Rend and Deep Wounds when you do critically strike. We also have your Mortal Strike, and then one of the 3 traditional specializations here. Mortal Strike on the realm, however, only reduces healing by 35%, rather than the traditional 50%, and this is due to some tuning we have at this level, where healing won't be as nerfed as hard by having massive heal cut. Poleaxe Specialization increases the rage generated from your attacks by 25%, and your critical strike bonus by 10% when you have axes or polearms, instead of just a passive 5% critical strike chance. Mace Specialization will also increase your total health by up to 3%, and ignore 12% of your opponent's armor. And Sword Specialization has a 10% chance to give you an extra chance to swing. This is mostly unchanged. Then down here we have Unrelenting Assault. It reduces the cooldown of your Overpower and Revenge abilities by 4 seconds, and increases the damage done by both by 20%. In addition, if you strike a player with Overpower while they're casting, their magical and healing damage is reduced by half. The 50% number might drop or be increased somewhere down the line. I'm not sure I'm content with that yet. So, until we actually have our alpha testing phase, I will not be changing this. Colossus Smash. A lot of people probably have seen this already, but it's a colossal swing with the warrior's weapon, full weapon damage, and then increases the damage they take from you by 30%. Some variants have it on other realms and other expansions, where it's some form of armor penetration, but ultimately the ability serves the same way, where you hit the target and they take a percentage more damage from you and your abilities. So it's still good for your burst window. And finally at the bottom, you have Bladestorm. You instantly whirlwind up to 4 enemies for the next 6 seconds, every 1 second. I believe I did change the damage to only be 50% of your weapon damage per swing, as opposed to 100% to make it a little more balanced. Look up spell, Bladestorm. I believe the version is right here. Ah, right. Let's see if I change the visual. Okay, well, let's get into combat, generate some rage really quickly. Right, the visual is from future expansions. Or maybe not. I don't know. I'll have to play with that and see. However, that concludes arms. As you can see, I don't have all my points put into arms because in the protection tree there is a new ability called Way of the Gladiator, and what this does is it allows you to equip a polearm in one hand and a shield in your offhand. While you have this polearm and shield equipped at the same time, your physical damage is reduced by 20%. This was used to offset the ability to actually use a shield. And by itself, it's seemingly not very powerful, hardly worthy of an 11-point talent. However, later on in the protection tree, or if you combine it with some arms talents like I have here, especially the poleaxe specialization, it starts becoming more of a formidable force. And the offset of the damage here, you still have the defensive utility of having a shield in the first place, which opens you up to all sorts of things, like being able to block and potentially switch into defensive stance and start triggering your revenge attacks, which can do quite a bit at this level, and I've not tuned it quite yet, so it's still at its base amount of damage. But with arms talents reducing the cooldown to 1 second, it can get pretty crazy pretty quickly. So let's check it out. Improved Thunderclap. It reduces the rage cost of Thunderclap and increases the damage and slowing effect. This is mostly unchanged, besides the rage cost. You also have Toughness, which increases your armor value, which includes shields, and reduces the duration of movement slowing effects by 30%. Improved Blood Rage will always give you a lot of extra rage. Shield Specialization is really good. Increases your chance to block attacks with a shield by 6%. That's fairly big. And it has a 100% chance to generate rage when that occurs. And so, when you're using Way of the Gladiator and you start blocking attacks against melee characters, you start generating a lot of raw rage. And it's very useful for being able to slam, because on this server there's no cast time on slam, but the rage cost is 30 instead of 15. And so by generating a lot of rage, you can kind of dump it with just pure weapon damage. You also have Concussive Blow, which is kind of a flagship ability of this class and specialization. So I kept it. We also have Bastion, which is, while in defensive stance, your chance to be critically hit is reduced, and when you dodge, block, or parry, you get a 10% attack damage buff for 12 seconds. Attack damage, I mean physical damage. What am I thinking? 10% of your damage is increased, which already offsets 10% damage reduced by this. So just by blocking and being in melee combat, you're already mitigating some of the offset from Way of the Gladiator. It's pretty good. Warbringer, as always, is great. You can use Charge to intercept and intervene while in combat in any stance. But you can also see in the tooltip that you can use Hamstring now in any stance as well. This means while staying in defensive stance, you could sit here and actively hamstring your enemies, controlling them a little bit better as a tank or a gladiator in PvP. It's quite useful. Much needed change, I think. Improved Revenge increases the damage of Revenge by a lot more and allows it to hit a second target. This is also pending review because the damage increase might be a little too much, but I'm sure with a lot of playtesting we'll find out. Next we have Battering Ram, which reduces the rage cost of Slam by 15. It makes it even better for rage dumps. And it also causes it to ignore 10% of your enemy's armor, and will now apply Sunder Armor as well. Kind of similar how to Devastate worked in Burning Crusade. So, now that you have Slam as a viable rage dump and utility, let's start packing it in there and really hitting the Sunder Armors in here. Really good for tank busting really big enemies like a Protection Druid or some kind of a Paladin with a lot of armor. On Vilebranch, I really want Protection to be a viable PvP spec too. So you might wind up actually encountering some of those. You also have Crushing Defeat, where your Slam has the chance to allow the use of Victory Rush by 50%. And so Victory Rush also becomes something that you can use in defensive stance occasionally. It's not proccing at the moment. I'll mess with that later, but it starts to get really, really good. You also have Shockwave. Considering reducing the stun duration down to 2 seconds for something that's such a low cooldown, and then adding a talent to it later, kind of how other classes have to invest talent points to make a CC spell really long-lasting or more potent. But for now, it's 4 seconds. And gives you access to Thunderstruck, which increases the damage of your Ren Cleveland Thunderclap by up to 6%, and causes that your Thunderclap to increase the damage dealt of your next Shockwave by 10%. So now, you have Thunderclap right here. We've reduced the cost. And it will build up stacks of Thunderstruck, so that your next Shockwave begins racking up damage as well as the crowd control. I believe it's, what, 3 stacks? Or was it 5? It's 3. I should put that in the tooltip. It's not there right now. But then boom, some bonus damage. Gag Order. This has remained unchanged. It increases the damage of your Shield Slam and gives your Shield Bash and Heroic Throw the ability to silence the target. Sword and Board. When your Slam or Revenge ability deals damage, has a chance of refreshing a Shield Slam, and then you can just smash people with your shield over and over again. Really strong. And you have Sentinel, which allows your successful blocks to have a 50% chance to block double the normal amount. Your stamina is increased by 15% and your block chance is increased by 20%. So now, you have it where if you have a lot of investment into protection, it starts to really, really shine. Unlike other classes, which we will see in other videos, that have some kind of passive stance that increase the amount of stamina, dodge, block, parry, whatever have you, to make the tank class really tanky. Sentinel really kind of rounds that out. It may seem a little strong at first, but after some playtesting, I'm sure we'll find a happy medium with Sentinel. 50% chance to block double the amount is really strong, but I don't think that there's other talents that increase your shield block value, so this isn't all that crazy. The stamina might be a little bit, and the block chance probably a bunch. It just increases your mitigation while using a shield total, which is really what protection's all about. Actually, ironically, protection's about mobility, but I'll talk about that more in other videos if we decide to do a bigger deep dive into protection itself. Shield Slam, final talent, requires a shield. You know what this is all about. Deals some damage, some pretty great damage, and it dispels a magic effect and also gives a high amount of threat. So in PvE, a lot of this stuff, in fact, is high damage for a lot of threat, but you have abilities like Shield Slam and Thunderclap and such to really help you manage it. Although the threat on abilities that are increased from like defensive stance have been increased by 50 or even 100% chance, because one of the main philosophies I have for Vilebranch anyway is I want tanks to not have to constantly fight for threat. I feel like threat building as a mechanic is fine, it's fun, and it's going to stay in game to some extent, but I want to find it where tanks aren't continuously fighting with their DPS for it all the time. Because I want tanks to focus more on when to push their buttons, rather than having to just constantly peel off of your party. The tank experience should feel more like a minigame, where you have to know the boss mechanics, and if you time your abilities wrong, you might have a chance of just straight up dying. And so if there's like a tank buster attack or ability, then you should want to have your cooldowns available to use it for things like shield block or shield wall. And if you blow it at the wrong time, then you deserve to die, and your party wipes. What you should not be wiping to is the rogue that decided to backstab an enemy before you engage with them. I don't think that's very fun. So there's multipliers added to threat generating abilities to increase the potency. Okay, now we're here at Fury. Fury Warriors have always been in a weird spot because They've been seen more as iron rogues than anything else, and don't really have their own identity fleshed out from, say, an enhancement shaman or a combat rogue, where most of your damage comes from auto attacks, and your whole identity is me hit good, sometimes crit, and then attack fast. So what I did was took more of a Cataclysm philosophy. Again, a lot of people will get like real crazy about it too, because Cataclysm wasn't the greatest expansion. But in terms of class design and the developers' philosophy behind their changes, there's a lot of good changes and a lot of cool abilities added. Likewise, a lot of early dungeons were really good too, because they try to bring back that vanilla feeling of if you make the wrong pull or you don't control a certain mob in a pack, then you die, because they'll like mana burn your healer or mind control you. It gets really dicey. So I like to pull some of my design choices from Cataclysm. Not necessarily all of them, obviously, because a lot of them aren't very good. I don't want to get too carried away, though. Let's go ahead and reset our talents and take a look at Fury. Fury has Blood Craze, but unlike the one you know, after taking damage, you have a 30% chance. No, it's 10% chance. I didn't change it. Different concept. 10% chance to regenerate 3% of your total health plus half of your spirit over 4 seconds. Why spirit? Well, something that I didn't go over earlier, I probably should, is as part of a major class overhaul, what I did was I changed some things around in which the class is played. There'll be a passive. I don't see it here, but there's a passive on each melee class that uses attack power about how the attack power is calculated. And so for warriors, you get about let's see, it's like cut up into sixths, and so you get like half as much from stamina, 2/3 as much for strength, and 1/3 from spirit, to make spirit a little more viable on warriors. And there are some things that will scale at that, such as Blood Craze. This is also an attempt to have different items and different stats on gear, have them more desirable and more viable. So it won't be too uncommon to see somebody wearing Of the Whale and having just as much attack power as somebody who stacks strength. And because of that, though, you have someone who has a lot more health and health regen, instead of just stacking strength. So you can still retain some of the power with different kinds of utility. And, you know, add it together and see what kind of combinations come out. So the design philosophy with this was to have that, where you have some health regeneration because of your berserking spirit, so to speak. You also have Battle Trance. Your Bloodthirst, Shield Slam, Mortal Strike attacks have a 15% chance to make it where your next special attack consumes no rage. Special attack, in this context, means any of your moves that cost rage that will require your melee weapon. You also have Cruelty, which is just a flat crit increase, because it's considered to be quote-quote mandatory. It's only a 2-pointer, so a lot of people just put 2 here and put 3 in something else. So you can get like durability or for more damage utility. Executioner is a fun one. Your Execute has a 100% chance to increase your attack speed by 5% for 30 seconds. I believe this stacks 5 times. And so if you're in a pickle where you're in a phase of a boss fight and you need a rage dump with Execute, you can build up a bunch of attack speed and keep that damage really coming on. In a PvP mindset, if an opponent really refuses to go down and they allow you to get your Execute off, well, by all means, you get that extra bit of damage burst and you can try to really push them back down. That's what this talent's for. Booming Voice is just passive utility here for your shouts, increasing the area and duration by up to 500%, which may seem like a lot. It's not too crazy. It makes your battle shout go from a 2-minute to like a 12-minute. And I find that's kind of more reasonable. A lot of players might just choose that because they don't want to constantly refresh their shouts. Same thing with, was it demoralizing? Yeah, right here. This becomes a 3-minute debuff instead of something that just falls off after, what, 30 seconds? So it becomes a little more viable too. Being a Fury Berserker, crazy warrior type of guy, it makes a lot of sense to me to have a more potent shout that really scares the enemy into having less damage. Insight is also another 2-pointer here. It increases the critical strike chance of your heroic strike, thunderclap, and cleave by 10%. So you can really crank up that critical strike chance with certain abilities. This is because of the identity of Fury. It's somebody who hits you hard and hits you fast, and often critically strikes you. But they don't have as much survivability as the other specs do. And of course, Intercept. Everybody's favorite mobility attack. Nothing's changed about this. Intensify Rage, though. Reduce the duration of... Right, the cooldown of all your major cooldowns. All of your Recklessness, Blood Rage, Death Wish, Berserker Rage. These abilities are now usable more often if you put points into it. So you can benefit from the extra damage, extra rage, big ass crit, all that stuff. Come and get it. Boom, boom, boom. Death Wish. Another fun cooldown. Whenever you do this, you become enraged and deal more damage at the cost of taking more damage. Very iconic Fury Warrior talent. No changes. Enrage. When you're critically hit by when you're hit by a critical strike, you enrage, gaining a bonus damage of up to 6%. I thought it changes to 10%. I'll have to check it out. For 12 seconds. This effect does not stack with Wrecking Crew. It does not stack with Wrecking Crew. I don't think I have Wrecking Crew available, so it's not really an issue. Heroic Fury, unchanged, removes immobilization effects, and refreshes the cooldown of your Intercept ability, so that you can intercept. If they jump away from you or something, you can try it again. Rampage, 5% passive crit for you and everyone else around you. Really, really strong. You can push a lot of critical strike chance with this build. You also have Bloodthirst, which is mostly unchanged. It actually scales with your max health, the healing portion. It can be used quite often. Die by the Sword. It increases your parry chance by 100% for 4 or 8 seconds whenever you're brought down to 35% health or less. So, as traditional with some kind of Berserker class, I like the idea of people are trying to bring you low by dropping your health very fast because you're a glass cannon. However, against a melee character, you might be too angry to necessarily die and start batting away hits. And so, this can also be used probably for like a tank build, but this is to give you a little more survivability with your Berserker Warrior class fantasy here. It's got a 2-minute interval cooldown, kind of similar to your what was it, Argent Protection talent in Protection Paladins, or Cheat Death in Rogues. You have Sudden Death. Melee hits have a chance to allow execute regardless of health state. In addition, you keep more rage. And Sudden Death here is really strong because your melee hits are constantly going off, especially if you have one-handed weapons. And it stacks really well with Executioner. And so you can build that extra attack speed and maybe get more procs and maybe get more executes. So some synergy there. You also have sweeping attacks here, which is traditionally, I think, an Arms Warrior thing, but was originally a Fury Warrior attack. A lot of people forget that. And you could dump 30 Rage to allow you to swipe and hit other enemies. In a PvE environment, it gives you a good measure of AoE, which is probably sorely lacking um, without cleave here. It's pretty good though. Alright, furious attacks. Some healing reduction from your auto attacks, but because it's so random, it is 50% as opposed to Mortal Strike's 35. Blood Surge. Your heroic strikes and bloodthirst hits, not crits, hits, have a 20. No, that should be 20. I gotta bring that down to 20. 20% chance of removing the rage cost in your next slam and causing it not to trigger your global cooldown for 5 seconds. Meaning your slam becomes this extra really quick hit amount of damage that you can use in between your rotation. Flurry, unlike the original version, will increase your armor penetrations of attack speed. So you're going to be hitting a little bit harder on enemies in PvE and PvP. And then finally, Fury of the Berserker. This gives you access to dual wield. It additionally increases the offhand attacks by 25% and allows your slam to strike with both of your weapons. This is so that your offhand attacks aren't as weak, but they're still weaker. But it's a big boon here. You really start dual wielding. See if I have the weapons for it. Here we go. Okay. Now you sit here and start banging away. Start building up some stacks. Build up some rage, and you start having some extra damage and such go off here. You also see that you got 2 stacks of furious attacks. That's pretty cool. Let's grab our bloodthirst ability. Maybe some free slams. Sudden death. That's a good one. So something like this, where you get the free executes off. Slapping bloodthirsts up there. Maybe you'll take the rage dump here for your slams and throw out some quick slams. Another execute. That's great. Get your attack speed starting to stack up pretty good now. Which means you probably crit more often. Get the enrage going still. Get some pretty good damage from not necessarily just your melee attacks, although that really is a large part of it, but you also have your abilities, which play a larger part in your rotations now, as opposed to maybe the vanilla version of the client, where a lot of your attacks are just autos. It feels really boring that way, I think. So, at least here you're able to mash buttons and trigger some cool stuff. Okay, so I think that covers most of these talents. Now to go over some of the baseline stuff. Of course you have battle stance, and you start with that. Charge, hamstring, mocking blow. Retaliation was something I decided to include along with your recklessness and your shield wall, because I feel that they're iconic for a warrior and really important for PvE content as well as PvP. Overall, they're just really fun abilities. They have a large cooldown, so you're not using it constantly. And with enough changes, you can kind of bring it into line where it's not that big of an issue. Right, we have power. Death Wish. That's a talent. Recklessness was added. Slam, of course, was added. Victory Rush was added. We also added... What else do we add? Shield Wall? I think Shield Block, yeah. Shield Block is really good. It's a lot different from the earlier versions. It really sucks I don't see the passive here. Showing how the changes work, but let's go ahead and check out a different warrior if we can. Yeah, let's go ahead and delete Greed Fist. Make him a new. Alrighty. Right, the intro. Okay. Do we have it? Yep, limit breaker. Okay. As the brutal conflict across the land continues to rage, warriors have found themselves needing to push beyond their physical limits, drawing upon their boundless stamina, formidable strength, and indomitable spirit, in order to weather the unrelenting storms of battle, outlast their foes, and emerge victorious. So your base melee attack power is calculated by a combination of your stamina, strength, and spirit. And so this tooltip helps show you. But you see your stamina is 44. Strength is 28. This is half as much strength. I believe spirit. Maybe it's 2/3 and 1/3. I think that checks out. And so spirit builds are a bit more viable. Right, heroic throw. That's what was added in there. Okay. Heroic throw. Because of that one talent for the silence, that makes sense. Yeah, these are all... Oh yeah, intervene. I wound up adding intervene because that's another mobility spell that defines warriors as the class that's not just tanky but also mobile. In fact, I think it's up there with druids and shamans in terms of mobility. The amount of stuff they have to run at you, run at their allies, maybe refresh and run again. You know, like charge, intercept, intervene, maybe a second intercept. There's crazy amounts of running around, and in early stages of the version of Vilebranch, I was going to add a heroic leap type ability to really emphasize that. I think it'd be a little bit overkill though. Let's see, the changes here, they're pretty cool. I think they make sense. Feel free to share in the comments below or on our Discord about your opinions on these changes. Maybe you have an idea or a better version of something you saw here today that I'd be willing to implement. Let me know what you think a level 19 warrior should feel like. And I think that's going to be the video.